Colleagues, I'll call the meeting to order now. Mr. Qualtrough, welcome back to our committee. I think this is your second appearance. And I should say at the outset that normally we have far more members of the Fourth Estate here, but apparently there's another meeting going on that seems to be taking some of the attention away. But we shall soldier on. Minister, once again, welcome. You know the drill, how we'll be going to questions immediately, but could I please get you to first introduce the officials who are with you, and I understand you've got an opening statement, so please proceed.
Thank you, and I will do the introductions via my opening statement. So, Mr. Chair, committee members, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today and to have the opportunity to appear before you to discuss our supplementary estimates B as well as updates on some of our recent accomplishments. C'est un plaisir pour moi de prendre la parole pour la première fois dans la
It's a pleasure for me to do this for the first time in the newly renovated West Block. As Minister of Public Services and Procurement and Accessibility, I'm proud of how much has been accomplished to restore and modernize a parliamentary precinct.
Public Services and Procurement Canada's new Deputy Minister, Bill Matthews, as well as Marty Muldoon, our Chief Financial Officer, our Associate Deputy Ministers Michael Vandergrift and Les Linklater, and our Assistant Deputy Minister of Defence and Marine Procurement, Andre Filon. From Shared Services Canada, we have Paul Glover, recently appointed President, as well as Sarah Paquette, Executive Vice President, and Denis Bombardier, Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Chair, these two organizations serve Canadians every single day by providing services and support to other departments and agencies. To support our operations, we are requesting $102.3 million in supplementary estimates B. This amount is comprised of $75.5 million for PSPC and $26.8 million for SSC. Allow me to begin with our requests related to PSPC, starting with one of the most pressing issues the Government of Canada is facing today, stabilizing the Phoenix pay system. While we're making progress, we know there is still a lot of work to do to ensure Canada's public servants are paid accurately and on time, every time. Comme j'ai dit au comité en décembre dernier, nous avons large...
As I reported to this committee in December, we have significantly increased our capacity to address pay issues, and we have introduced measures to ensure public servants receive more useful help and support when they contact our client contact center.
About the success we've had with our pay pods. You'll recall that this approach assigns compensation advisors to the employees of a specific organization. These dedicated advisors develop departmental expertise and relationships and work to address all outstanding transactions in an employee's pay file, rather than addressing issues by transaction type. New pay pods were rolled out just last week, bringing us up to 34 departments that are being served using the pay pod model. This represents approximately 154,000 employees. We're also on track to have all 46 departments served by the Pay Center using the pod model by May of this year. Since January 2018, we've decreased the backlog by nearly 160,000 transactions and reduced the overall queue for pod and non-pod departments combined by an average of 25%. Pod departments alone have seen a 29% reduction in their queue, demonstrating the success of this approach. I should also add that we've processed more than $1.5 billion in retroactive payments for employees. Nous aidons aussi les employés de...
We're also supporting employees during the tax season by working with Revenue Canada Agency and Revenue Quebec to ensure that employees are provided with accurate tax slips. And we continue to offer flexible repayment options for employees who have received overpayments. We are committed to making this situation right for public servants and their families.
B, we are requesting $25.1 million for continued efforts to stabilize the Phoenix pay system. Although we still have work to do, I can assure you that we'll continue working to ensure people get paid accurately and on time. I now turn to our request for new funds in support of the Receiver General's operation. Every year, the Receiver General incurs costs for processing transactions on behalf of federal organizations. They include the card acceptance fees we pay so that Canadians can make payments to the Government of Canada using debit and credit cards, and postage fees to mail checks to Canadians. These fees have been growing above our normal baseline, and they fluctuate every year. We are requesting $13.5 million to address these costs. Mr. Chair, our supplementary estimates B also include $2.8 million in new funds to support the Integrity Regime program, aimed at addressing corporate wrongdoing. This more robust approach to improper, unethical, and illegal business practices will come into effect soon following public consultation. The funds we have requested will address increased workload and operational costs associated with administering the new regime ensuring that our government conducts business with ethical suppliers and ultimately holds those suppliers accountable. Mr. Chair, I'd also note that there is $22.9 million from the sale of surplus real property that PSPC will reinvest to preserve and maintain our real property portfolio and provide tenants with healthy and safe accommodations. This will help PSPC meet the needs of federal organizations and provide sound stewardship of federal buildings on behalf of Canadians. I'd now like to provide some updates on some of our key achievements. We've made great progress on our promise to replace Canada's fighter fleet. We work closely with the Australian government to procure 18 F-18 fighter aircraft, plus equipment to supplement the current CF-18 fleet. We received the first 2 fighter aircraft from Australia on February 17th, ahead of schedule. In addition, we have just concluded last week the second round of one-on-one engagement with suppliers for the Future Fighter program to purchase 88 modern fighter jets. There's also been a number of major developments in Canada's national shipbuilding strategy. On February 8th, we announced that Lockheed Martin Canada had been selected for the design of 50 new Canadian surface combatants that will be built at Irving's Shipbuilding Halifax Shipyard. This is the largest, most complex procurement ever undertaken by the Government of Canada, and it was done in an open and transparent manner. With this contract, design work is proceeding, which will be followed by construction in the early 2020s. In addition, we are advancing construction work on other large ships on both coasts, which are generating substantial economic benefits across the country and revitalizing a world-class marine industry that supports Canadian innovation. As noted earlier, we have also worked hand in hand with our parliamentary partners towards a successful transition of the operations of Parliament to the West Block and the newly restored Senate of Canada building. This will allow major restoration work to begin on Centre Block so it can continue to serve as the seat of our democracy and proudly welcome future generations of Canadians. Monsieur le Président, je vais maintenant me tourner vers Service.
Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to Shared Services Canada. SSC has made tremendous progress over the past few years. Now led by Mr. Glover, with Luc Gagnon as the newly created Chief Technology Officer, SSC is entering the next phase of its evolution. This new office will help SC deliver a more coherent vision of modern and secure digital government.
180 legacy data centers, replacing them with new state-of-the-art enterprise data centers. This is resulting in more efficient and less costly IT operations for the Government of Canada. SSC also continues to support its clients in the implementation of the government's Cloud First policy. There are now over 40 active cloud computing accounts that are helping provide modern and efficient IT services to Canadians. SSC completed the first phase of an e-cabinet initiative, which allows ministers to access their secure documents from their tablets anywhere at any time. In 2017-2018 alone, over 1,200 employees joined the department. This provided vital additional capacity to meet the growing technology demands of federal organizations. Today, we're requesting $26.8 million in Supplementary Estimates B funding. This request includes $20.3 million for cyber and information technology security initiatives to respond to the most pressing gaps in government systems. This funding will continue to allow SSC to provide modern, reliable, and secure information technology infrastructure and provide world-class digital services to Canadians. Mr. Chair, Public Services and Procurement Canada and Shared Services Canada have diverse yet equally important mandates, and we are thankful to the many devoted and skilled public servants who help fulfill these mandates. Grâce aux fonds supplémentaires que nous demandons aujourd'hui.
With the additional funding we are requesting today, these organizations will be better to meet the needs of client federal departments and agencies, and ultimately all Canadians.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Before we get into questions, just a quick housekeeping note. As you know, we got a bit of a late start for today's meeting because we were debating Mr. Peterson's private member's bill, so we can all blame him. But, Madam Minister, I know that you have stated, at least in our schedule, that you would be here until 4:30. Of course, we won't have a full hour with you unless you are willing to stay and extend your stay a little longer.
I am, for sure.
That'll be great. If we can get through at least the complete round of questioning, that would be much appreciated. We'll now start the questioning with a 7-minute round of interventions with Madame Ratanzi.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for being here. And to ensure that I do not interrupt in the 7 minutes round, I'm going to ask you a few questions altogether so that you have a response for me. So I look at your interim supplies, and under vote 1B, you're requesting $2.6 million to strengthen the integrity regime. So I want to know, for our benefit or edification, when was it put in place? What does it intend to do? And when it was originally designed, what were some of the challenges? And what are you doing to overcome those challenges? So 4 questions in a row, so you can answer that.
Well, I'll do my best. So basically, the integrity regime is a suite of administrative tools to protect the integrity of procurement and real property agreements. It was put in place in July of 2015 by the previous government. And really, the purpose was to take action against improper, unethical, and illegal business practices, and at the same time holding companies accountable for their misconduct. Doing this, effectively addressing corporate wrongdoing, really protects the integrity of markets and addresses barriers to figuring out how to deal with these companies. I want to make sure I get some things in. When I became Minister of PSPC, the plans for the review of the integrity regime were very much underway. So for my department, that was, if you'll recall, in July of 2017. That meant that we were consulting and we were ongoing kind of updating the integrity regime, which had been introduced 2 years earlier. We did a lot of industry engagement. As I understand it, it was done by the previous government before the integrity regime was put into place. We kept that industry engagement ongoing. And it's really been this kind of iterative process. They actually had what was called an industry engagement group, and they met with the previous government twice before July of 2015. We continued to meet with this industry engagement group, and we heard a number of, I don't know if I'd elevate them to concerns, but some challenges they were facing, both in understanding the goals and what was happening within the regime, and also in terms to what was perceived by industry to be a rigidity in the policy itself. Based on feedback from the industry, we decided to do a broader consultation on corporate wrongdoing, including the integrity regime, which included 70 submissions and over 300 organizations and individuals that participated in the consultations. I mean, we really took a massive kind of public approach to all the amendments. Do you want me to go into what the amendments that are kind of proposed, or do you want me to?
You made a statement saying the previous regime was rigid, and you faced some criticism from the industry. Am I hearing you correctly? Did you face criticism from the industry for the previous integrity regime that was put in place?
Yeah, so what we heard on a couple of different levels was that there is, because the policy hasn't yet been changed, a 10-year fixed debarment term. And what we heard was, while industry was amenable to broadening potentially the scope of the triggers that potentially could cause debarment, they requested some flexibility in the term, the fixing of the term. So, instead of, and we looked at international best practices. So we have, in the United States, for example, it's a 3-year debarment. In Quebec, it's a 5-year debarment. At the World Bank, it's a 10-year debarment. So what we were hearing from industry was having a fixed 10-year period didn't allow us to take into account any kind of mitigating circumstances that might be present, i.e. this behavior had been done a number of times, the corporate structure had changed, the board had overturned, things that might in fact lead to, maybe an admission of guilt, who knows, the type of crime that we're talking about. So it was really a response to some concerns raised about the kind of lack of flexibility in the term, the 10-year term.
And so have you started the second consulting? Have you made changes? Have you accommodated? Or you are stuck with the previous regime?
So in 2017, in the fall of 2017, we held a public consultation. And as I mentioned, we heard 70 submissions from 300 organizations. And it was really quite extraordinary, the feedback we got. We then took that feedback in and produced what we called a What We Heard report, which was effectively kind of a public summary of what we'd heard in the various submissions as to how we could improve the integrity regime. We then went back kind of into government and drafted a new draft ineligibility and suspension policy, which is the policy that governs the integrity regime. And then we put that out for consultation last fall. And we are now in the process of reviewing the submissions that we had on that second round of consultation based on our draft policy.
So my question then is, how many companies or corporations have been barred from doing business with the government of Canada since 2015? Do you know?
I want to have an accurate number, so I'm going to ask Michael. Michael, would you know that answer? I apologize.
Sorry, I'll kick to Michael
Bill?
if I get it wrong. That's all right. My understanding is it's 3 at present that are under the regime.
That's what I was going to guess, but I didn't want to guess.
Okay. And how many employees are responsible for overseeing the corporate accountability?
Mr. Chair, just very quickly, as the member mentioned, there is money being requested in the interim supplementary estimates to augment this team, but currently 35 employees. With the dollars that are in the supplementary estimates, that could grow up to 60. And that group right now handles about 26,000 verifications and validations a year. The money being requested, it relates to the new draft policy. You know, if it is implemented, it will require additional resources because there's more work required, broader scope of offenses, things like that. So currently 35, could grow up to 60, depending on what happens with the new policy.
Sorry, with the new funding, you expect to increase from 35 to 60, is that right?
I would say up to 60 because the new policy is in draft. Don't know what the final policy will say, and the workload will very much depend upon the final policy. The broader the scope of offenses and the more linkages to international organizations, provincial laws, the more employees you need to sort of enforce. And I understand we're out of time.
Mr. Nicholson, welcome to our committee. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister, and to all those with you here today. Minister, you've got a very busy portfolio, I've got to say. You've been in this portfolio now, I think it's about 1.5 years now, and there is lots going on. I mean, you did talk in your opening statement, and I wanted to go to that first, and that's with respect to the Phoenix pay backlog. It seemed to me that you have, I think you said about $25 million as part of these estimates here to work on this. I'll tell you what concerns me is an article I saw just a couple of days ago, and it was reported in CBC that there was a document prepared in August 2018 for a deputy minister in employment and social development ahead of a meeting with the Treasury Board in charge of helping to find a system to replace Phoenix. Now, it says that as the federal government forges ahead to replace the Phoenix payroll system, internal documents obtained by CBC News through access to information suggest that the backlog could take another 3 to 5 years. And then it goes on to say that it actually could be 10 or more years for the system to achieve overall stability. I mean, it's one thing, we're waiting 10 years for the rehabilitation of one of our parliament buildings, but that seems, way out of line. Don't you agree? I mean, 3 to 5 years. I mean, these people have suffered enough, many of these employees, and I'm sure you've heard, as I've heard from them, and that has to be very discouraging to see that report. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I do share your sense of worry on behalf of public servants. It does continue to keep me up at night, and it continues to keep my team laser focused on our efforts to both stabilize the system, and by that I guess I would mean ensure that the kind of software, hardware, policy kind of infrastructure is in place to ensure that we can confidently say people are being paid accurately, but also address the backlog. As I said, we've been down, we've reduced the backlog by 160,000 transactions. Our current dashboard that's publicly available has a number of 275,000 outstanding transactions with financial impact, and another 75,000 with a financial non-financial impact. Pardon me. I am aware of the media reports, and I will say that those numbers are in line with what both the Comptroller General and the Auditor General reported. As I said to this committee, I am more optimistic than that. I think if you'll see that we've reduced the queue by 29% in the past year, knowing that we'll be at full pod by May. I mean, I guess we could all do the math. I think it's somewhere around 3 years, but it's not 3 to 5 and it's not up to 10. And if you add on to that the reality that we are in the process of replacing Phoenix with the next generation of pay system, that, there's not a scenario where 10 years from now we will be still having Phoenix.
Well, that is somewhat reassuring. It seems to me that when people have approached me about some problem with either getting paid or having been overpaid and then having problems with their taxes and the thing, do you have people within the department who can look at one of these issues and say, look, we can fix this here. We'll send you out your check. You know what I mean?
And our team, both within my office and within PSPC, have done a lot of work to create what effectively is a kind of priority list on a sliding scale of, I can't remember what the word is, Les. Pardon me, hardship. Sorry, yes, it's a sliding. So we will prioritize requests based on the kind of agreed upon level of hardship that a person might be experiencing. And so I guess, Les, maybe you could speak more to that. I apologize, but there are mechanisms.
Certainly, we do have a unit that is dedicated to look at these types of cases where there are circumstances of excessive financial hardship for rapid resolution. We do have to be careful in terms of our approach. People do have a number of pay problems, but we do look at severity as a critical factor in terms of no pay, low pay, or missing things like severance pay or having inordinate delays with those types of payments. So we have been building capacity to be able to deal with those types of cases.
Now, is the $25 million, if you had more, could you do this more quickly, or what? Is that the issue? You don't have enough money or enough resources to get this solved more quickly?
The $25 million in the estimates reflect a couple of dynamics. The first would be accommodation costs for staff, $11 million, and the remainder is a reprofile of funding from the previous fiscal year that was not used. It was assigned to a project that we have left behind and moved on with an alternative solution. We've reprofiled the money through the supplementary estimates.
Thank you. Well, listen, let me change the subject here and raise one of the issues that you raised, and this is the integrity regime that you have been developing. One of the things you said in your opening remarks is that you have getting pressure from industry. I imagine SNC-Lavalin would be one of those companies that would be putting pressure on this area. Is that correct?
Are you asking if SNC-Lavalin participated in the consultations?
Well, you said you're getting pressure from industry. I'm just asking, I'm assuming that they've got as big a stake in this as anybody, I would guess.
I don't know the answer to that directly, but what I meant when I said that was that we had put together this industry engagement group, and that would include organizations like Construction Canada. I don't remember all the other, but do you have a list?
Sorry, just in terms of who we receive comments from is through the engagement and the draft policy, Business Council of Canada, Canadian Bar Association, Chamber of Commerce, Transparency International Canada. You may know of others less, but it was a broad range of groups. And
I should have said industry organizations and associations more than individual kind of industry companies. They were more industry associations.
So you don't know of any individual companies that have approached you or the department on this issue?
I don't know the list of the 300 organizations offhand that participated in the consultation, but is that available? Is that? Sorry, I'm not meaning to be difficult, but I can't recall offhand.
But you've got a copy of it. I think the committee would appreciate getting a copy of that.
in terms of the list of organizations that have commented,
Or companies.
or companies, we can absolutely get you that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but as Mr. Nicholson asked, if you could provide a list in writing through our clerk of those companies, that would be helpful. Mr. Blakey, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you. So carrying on the same theme, I guess my question would be, outside of the formal consultation process, were there individual companies that contacted the department or met with the department to discuss the integrity regime?
So I'm going to presume you're asking specifically about SNC-Lavalin just because we know what's going on these days.
Yep.
We have an ongoing arrangement with them because of the administrative agreement. So we have regular dealings with SNC-Lavalin. Personally, I have not met with them, but because of the ongoing arrangement, the reporting requirements, there's absolutely an ongoing interaction. As part of that interaction, they have asked questions to officials about the draft policy in terms of getting clarity around how it would work if implemented. So I think that answers your question.
So they have been communicating with the department about the integrity regime
And
as
if
part
I
of the
might add,
compliance agreement?
it wouldn't surprise me if SNC wasn't on that list of 300, but I cannot I can't speak to whether it was or not. It's the second biggest engineering firm in the country. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know for
We'll
sure.
just confirm right now, they were on the list. They were one we did receive comments from. They are not the only one, but they were on that list.
And for the minister, do you and your government feel that a 10-year suspension from federal contracts is too severe a penalty for companies convicted of criminal charges?
Well, based on, I don't think that question can be answered in isolation. Based on the feedback we received and the international best practice, we determined that if we're going to expand the scope of potential triggers, i.e. offenses that could result in debarment, or the business ethics, violations of kind of a business ethics that might be included, if we are going to expand the scope of offenses, that we needed to have a sliding scope of punishment, if you will. So we couldn't justify giving a company a 10-year ban for a labor code violation or an equal ban as to, say, a terrorist conviction. So
yeah, and I think that's something that you heard in the consultation, that the severity of the offense committed should determine the time period of suspension. So, I mean, in your opinion, is the bribery of public officials a pretty serious offense? Where would you put it on the scale of seriousness?
If I'm going to be most responsive to your question, I would say that's not my call to make. We have an independent registrar of suspension and ineligibility who makes these determinations, and to whom I have delegated absolute authority.
But you're the
I don't have
minister
any
is
say in
signing
that.
off. Are you not signing off on the integrity regime? And government
I am.
doesn't have
We
a
will
role
be signing
in
off,
setting
yes, on the policy changes, but the application of that policy falls directly to bureaucrats.
Well, then, I mean, it would not be appropriate to have in a policy like the integrity regime a discrimination between more serious charges and less serious charges. That would be an option. So, I mean, I'm just curious to know, do you think that the bribery of public officials is a very serious offense, or do you think it's not a serious offense? Where does it fall on the scale for you and for your government?
Well, our government doesn't have a position on kind of the hierarchy of offenses. I think it's determined on a case-by-case basis based on all the factors applicable in a case, and it would be inappropriate
there's
for me to make
discrimination in the
that
criminal
call.
code, for instance, between the severity of offenses, and legislation is passed to discriminate between more serious and less serious offenses. So I'm a little
And
puzzled, frankly.
We will set the policy parameters.
Does this have to do with the estimates, really? Integrity. Fine. Yes, about the integrity regime, but not about the application of the integrity regime. It has nothing to do with the
Madame
estimates.
Mendez, the reason I'm not giving any extra latitude to this, but I am listening very intently as to the questions and the answers. The minister spoke at length in her opening statement about the integrity regime. Mr. Matthews had talked about the number of individual companies as well as organization and industries. And Mr. Blakey is questioning on the integrity regime and exactly the scope of seriousness. I think that's relevant, and I would ask you to continue your line of questioning. If I think it comes to there's a certain line, I will certainly intervene, as I've done on many occasions before, and I think you know me to be as fair as I possibly can in these situations. But I have not heard anything yet which would cause me to intervene again with Mr. Blakey. You continue, Mr. Blakey. You've got 3 minutes and 42 seconds left.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Essentially what's happening in these estimates is the government is asking for about $2.5 million to implement an integrity regime. Now, we have a variety of offenses within the criminal code, and nobody thinks that somehow government shouldn't have an opinion about whether certain types of offenses are more severe or not, or that the code shouldn't automatically discriminate between certain types of offenses that are obviously more offensive than other types of offenses. So I don't think it would be inappropriate in the integrity regime to make a discrimination between certain kinds of offenses as being more serious and less serious. The minister herself has said that some offenses are more serious and less serious. So I'm asking her how serious she thinks it is that a company bribes public officials in order to get work. And I'm frankly a little miffed that I can't get an answer. I thought it was an easy one.
Well, I guess what I'm hesitant to say is start creating kind of a list of kind of ranking offenses and wouldn't want that to become in any way kind of a strict pronouncement on what the registrar, who's independent, should take into consideration.
So you don't
what I
think
will
that
say,
in
though,
any
is the severity of the
circumstance-
offense will be one of the factors taken into consideration by the registrar. Bill, can you?
The only thing
No,
I would add,
it's okay. I don't need an explanation from an official. I think I'm asking political questions about the nature of the integrity regime, and I'm still, I'm disappointed that I can't get an answer. I mean, we leave it up to judges, for instance, to make decisions about the severity of particular offenses before court, but that doesn't mean that we can't, in our law, distinguish between certain offenses that are more serious or less serious. So I'm just kind of puzzled that I can't get an answer to that. And the reason why I'm interested is because I do think that for the, you've said that you want to add more charges and expand the scope, recognizing that new charges may be of a lesser severity of the existing charges. But the question is, why can't the 10-year period apply to the existing charges that were recognized as being quite severe? Or do you think that the severity of the existing charges was overrepresented in the original policy?
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand that was the question. What I would say is we are making a policy choice, if this new policy is adopted, to add flexibility in how, in the registrar's determination of both the severity of the offense and several other kind of factors that they will take into consideration in the decision around debarment and debarment term.
Well, I recognize that there's more flexibility being built in. I guess what I'm disagreeing with is the notion that somehow to have a flexible policy, you can have no discrimination between the severity of offenses at all. Nor do I think that it's obvious that in the case of a serious offense, that the 10-year penalty would be just inappropriate. So anyway, I suppose we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. I am interested to know, I mean, it seems to me that part of the interest in modifying the policy is a concern for jobs and trying to maintain jobs within the Canadian economy and shield, workers from wrongdoings of corporate executives. But I'm kind of interested to know, like, if the changes to the integrity regime that are happening now would provide the government a mechanism for, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but for shielding workers from the consequences of decisions of corporate executives, why then the government would feel that they need to take ulterior paths to do that, like pressuring the former Attorney General, for instance, to abandon criminal charges.
Mr. Blakey, at this point in time, you're completely out of time. One of your colleagues might want to take up that question further with the minister, but we're going over to Mr. Peterson now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for being with us again, and welcome Mr. Matthews, and congratulations on your new role. Thank you, Minister, for taking the time. I want to talk about the integrity regime a little bit too. You mentioned that when you first became the minister around July 2017, that there was already steps underway. You elaborated on the groundwork that had already been done, and you, in your earlier statement, referred to July 2015. Was that a mistake? Did you mean July 2017? I want to get that.
Oh, no. So, thank you. The integrity regime was initially put in place in July of 2015.
Okay.
And through this ongoing kind of ongoing industry engagement, there was a review. There was a desire for further consultation before any changes were made to the integrity regime. Okay. Then we decided to have the consultation in this fall of 2017.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies that for me. That was my misunderstanding, and I apologize. Now, I understand that the public was consulted in sort of two separate phases, or twice, if you want to say. Why was there the need for the secondary outreach?
Well, again, just in the spirit of consulting with the public, we consulted on any changes that the public thought there should be. We published a report on what we heard in terms of what those changes could be. We then went away and drafted a draft new ineligibility and suspension policy. Then the second consultation was putting that out for comment by the public to get any further feedback and to see if it had kind of reflected or addressed any concerns or potential betterment of the policy.
Do you foresee that being an ongoing outreach process?
I suspect it will be, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would be.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just the regular cycle for government policy. Typically, once you have a mature policy, you're reviewing it every 5 years or unless something pops up. But this is still a relatively new policy in government standards. So fairly frequent reviews of policy, 2-3 year marks, quite common.
So when do we expect all this to be put in place finally?
Well, as I said, we're reviewing the feedback we got on the draft policy, and I would say in a month-ish, we will finalize the final policy. Would that be accurate? 4 to 6 weeks? Yeah.
And what discretion would you, in this particular case, but a minister under this regime have when it comes to suspensions for specific companies? Would there be case by case input by the minister of the day, or is this going to be done by a third sort of arm's length?
Yeah, so there is the position of the registrar of ineligibility and suspension. I might have reversed those two, but it's either suspension and ineligibility or ineligibility and suspension, to whom I've delegated complete authority to make these decisions. The minister does not sign off on debarment decisions in this regime. It's completely independent.
Okay, so that administrative official would be the one signing off. Okay, thank you for that. So, and then I think you're asking for the 2.6 million. What was it? Sorry, I've had the number off. That's going to be sufficient. That money will be
2.8.
sufficient to get it across the finish line, so to speak.
That's our estimation, yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to move along to a bit of a different topic now. It's a totally different topic. Just I noticed there that I want to talk a little bit about the federal laboratories. And I think Budget 2018 provided more than $2.8 million in funding to renew federal labs. A billion. Sorry, that's right. I got my number wrong. It's 2.8 billion. That'll do a lot more than 2.8 million for sure. How is PSPC partnering with the science department? Who actually carries out the work? Are these public servants doing the work, or is there third parties that are doing some of the research and science work?
So the big picture here is when we came into government, we encountered a situation where our science infrastructure was dilapidated, is probably a kind word to put it. It was very much in need of significant investment, both in terms of the structure, like the buildings themselves, and in terms of the equipment that our scientists were using. And there was a lot of duplication, there was a lot of isolation. Departments weren't necessarily kind of capitalizing on what other departments were doing in science. And so we set about this journey, and the Minister of Science was the lead to get back in the business of science, but also to take a more strategic approach to how we manage the buildings and the infrastructure that enabled the science that we ask of our scientists. We actually now have an ADM responsible. Do you want to, which one? You?
Well, go ahead, but I want to say something.
Everybody's involved in this.
Everyone wants to talk about science. So thank you. So just a couple of thoughts. This was largely it's about science, but it's largely about collaboration inside the federal government first. So science communities, making sure that we get value for money by partnering on the IT front, which Paul probably wants to weigh in on, financial front, equipment front, laboratories. So it was really about bringing together the science community to make sure we get good value for money with this investment. So it is really a collaborative exercise, science first, enabled by some real property investments like labs. And that's where PSPC comes in, is in the end of the day, building whatever it is that is needed to enable the science community. Paul, you may want to weigh in.
Thank you. In addition to the science laboratory infrastructure, there is also the data infrastructure. So increasingly, a lot of science is both collaborative in nature. It's driven not just by what happens in the lab, but the sharing and interpretation of that through data sets. So we're making sure that we're laying down the infrastructure that will support the scientists in those labs to be able to deal with large data, to collaborate, to move that within the science network, so that it's not just the facilities, but the information flow between those facilities.
I'm probably out of time, Mr. Chair, am I? Or?
You've got about 40 seconds.
Okay. I'll just end on a comment. We all have federal public servants in our ridings. We hear about some of the issues that they've gone through. So we're all sympathetic and empathetic to their plight, and we just want to thank you that progress is being made. Continue the hard work, and do what you can do to continue to get this across the line as well with Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to our 5-minute round of interventions, Minister, just for your benefit, and once again, I thank you for agreeing to stay here until we complete our full round of questions. We've got about 23 minutes left. Say that for your staff and the audience, so they'll know exactly when to get the minister out of here, when to bring out the hook. Mr. McCauley, we'll go to you for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. Minister, when did you become aware that the Director of Public Prosecutions declined to offer S&C a DPA?
Before we go on, Mr. McCauley, do you want to expand on that just a little bit for my edification to show the connection?
We're also discussing the DRR, the Departmental Results Reports. There's that lengthy segment, I think almost an entire page in the department's DRR about the DPA, about the study, about the consultation.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I actually don't know, honestly, the answer to that question. Certainly, any conversations have had with cabinet colleagues on, I apologize, I don't know the answer to that question.
At any time, did you ever discuss the the option of the Attorney General overriding the ruling on the DPA?
The only conversations I would have had would have been in the context of kind of we took kind of a whole of government approach to corporate wrongdoing.
When you say we, like who was involved in
Well,
those discussions?
I will unpack that if you don't mind. So as a government, we took a very whole of government. So we approached corporate wrongdoing not just as a matter of integrity regime, but we did the consultations both on the integrity regime and
But when were these discussions held?
Sorry,
When were these discussions held?
Well, all throughout the process, because we had
the entire year and a half, including after the ruling was made?
Sorry, I'm trying to get to the point that the conversations that I would have had with cabinet colleagues on this would have been in the context of approaching our whole of government approach to corporate wrongdoing, which included consultations on both the integrity regime and on the potential of having a DPA instrument, if you will.
Were you ever approached by the PM or the PMO or anyone in his staff, to lower the 10-year contracting ban?
I feel that would be covered by cabinet confidence.
So you can't say no to that?
I will neither say yes or no, because I'm very, very rigid on my confidence in cabinet confidentiality.
Okay. Let me ask you, there's 3 companies have been banned under the integrity regime, just 3. Only one company has been allowed the administrative leave on the integrity regime. Guess what? It's SNC. What was special about SNC that got the administrative pass on it, but the other 3 companies didn't?
My understanding that we have entered into an administrative agreement with this company is while there were criminal proceedings ongoing.
Okay. How many other companies have applied for this?
I don't know the answer.
We can try and find out during the hearing if that's
I'd like to know how many have applied and how many have been turned down, please.
Can I clarify? I'm not sure it's necessarily a matter of a company applying for this. It's whether PSPC would initiate and require a company to have one of these agreements to continue contracting with the government of Canada.
PSPC then, did they go out of their way to approach SNC-Lavalin and offer this to them?
So if I could maybe weigh in, Mr. Chair, so the process would, PSPC would issue a notice.
I don't want to know the process, I just want to answer to the question. Did you go out of your way then and offer this to them?
I will answer your question by giving you the process. PSPC notifies the organizations they're being suspended. So that's our action to the 3 companies in question. They then have a chance to respond. And based on their information, there's an assessment of, based on the actions they've taken, transparency, have they changed, corporate directors, et cetera. You then reach an agreement or not. So the notification is on PSPC. It's not an application process.
It's a relatively rare process then. Have you done this for anyone else and then continued to ban them from government contracting?
So I think it's back to the 3. 3 have been suspended and someone is,
okay.
Michael, do you want to weigh in?
Let me just ask you, I'm just going to move on, please. Did Jerry Butts or Kitty Telford or anyone in the PMO talk to anyone in PSPC regarding the integrity regime? Not necessarily the DPA, but the integrity regime.
Not to me. I'm looking down the table here.
Not to my knowledge.
No.
So no or not to your knowledge?
I can only answer to my knowledge, so not to my knowledge.
Mr. Qualtrough?
The only conversations that would be had would be as cabinet deliberated the integrity regime and sought policy input on the direction we would go, and certainly under the more broad envelope of corporate wrongdoing, certainly there would have been discussions that, as you can appreciate, would be covered by cabinet confidence.
Okay. Let me just ask you, Ottawa Citizen and an ATIP we have says the PMO directed PSPC to start the review. Is that correct? Of the integrity regime?
The review was well underway when I assumed position.
I didn't ask if it was well underway. Did the PMO direct PSPC to start this review?
To the best of my knowledge, no. But as you can appreciate, I assumed this role in July of 2017.
So the
and it
ATIP
was
that
well
we
underway.
have saying so from the government.
Mr. McCauley, I'm sorry, we're completely out of town. We'll go now to Monsieur Drouin. 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to make one comment on the integrity framework. And I was in Ottawa before, before 2015, paying attention to this particular issue. And Mr. Nicholson would recall, because he was sitting at the cabinet table, and the original integrity framework proposal included affiliates, and that was taken out of the equation because the government of the day understood that if an affiliate was accused of wrongdoing in other countries, this would have severe consequences to companies in Canada, and most importantly, to employees in Canada. So there is no big conspiracy about one company trying to get away with it. It's about employees, and it was impacting a lot more than just one particular company. Now back to Phoenix, Ms. Qualtrough, thank you a lot for being here. I do have a lot of public servants in the riding, and one of the issues they consistently ask me is, how are we doing on this, and what progress can I tell them that we've done since this thing started?
Well, I guess, and I don't mean to sound cheeky, but when I was here a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, among different committees, the marching orders to the team was, how do we stop the numbers from going up? And now the marching orders are, how do we make the numbers go down quicker? So we've definitely had a turnabout on this file. As I said, 160,000 transactions have been reduction of the queue by 160,000. We have 1,500 employees working on this. We will have every department in a pay pod. Client, so public servant satisfaction is continually going up. We have emergency pay in place. We have modified the tax law so that public servants will only have to pay back net overpayments instead of gross, which was a major pain point and something that worried us all until we managed to slay that dragon. So definite advancement, but not quick enough.
And I've noticed that obviously your department has been pushing for pay pods, and obviously there's been successes with the pay pod model. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, so what we had tried at first was to take a transactional approach to addressing these issues, thinking there would be efficiencies in attacking all of one type of transaction at a time. And certainly there are cases, and I would refer to kind of disability and maternity leave as those cases where we still do that. But what we heard from public servants is how they were experiencing this was they weren't being made whole. So we needed a model that would address all the transactions of a particular employee at a time. What that meant was, of course, that if we weren't necessarily reducing our number of employees, but we were reducing the number of transactions. And as we moved into a pod model, which I will say was the suggestion of the employees at Miramichi, we noticed greater client satisfaction, greater employee satisfaction in Miramichi because we were taking more of a people approach to this. What I predict, if you'll indulge me, is that this will be stabilized. Backlogs within departments will be achieved, kind of on a rolling basis, corresponding to when a particular department went into a pod model.
And for Joe and Jane Porch, when we talk about a pay pod, what does that look like for
Well, thank you for asking. It's a fun way, I guess. I'm being cheeky. I apologize, but it's a way to describe a team of compensation advisors and other experts that are tasked with dealing with the pay issues of a particular department. So, Les, can you tell me the team members for a given pod?
Certainly. So we have experienced compensation advisors. We have support staff who are able to help with more straightforward transactions. There's a data analytics capacity to be able to predict and channel the workload to the appropriate staff who have the skills to be able to deal with particular transactions. And there are also coaches and mentors so that when people hit a sticky wicket, there's somebody that they can reach out to get help to deal with the work that's in front of them. All of that helps work with a team lead who has the liaison function with the department and agency, both with their human resources and financial groups, to make sure that the flow of information goes between individuals and they build the relationship for the department within the pod, within the respective pod.
And what we've seen is the expertise developed within the pod with respect to the particular department or agency. So the group tasked with working with Veteran Affairs, for example, would know the kind of nuances of that work, the kind of overtime they do, the quirks in the collective agreement. Like it's a very important relationship that's being built, and we are being very well served by them.
Thank you.
Mr. McCauley, back to you for 5 minutes.
I just want to go bring attention. This is from an ATIP, and actually states, following a direction from the Prime Minister's office to undertake consultations over the summer of 2017. So it goes back to my question, did the Prime Minister order it? This is right from an ATIP from the government itself, so it was. Let me ask you a question, Minister, please. The clerk of the PCO in the Justice Committee, referring to the SNC and the potential for them to get a deferred or DPA, said the matter was never discussed at Cabinet, never. Now, is he correct that it was never discussed at Cabinet?
A point of orders, Mr. Chair. Relevance?
I'm still paying Madame Ratanzi quite a bit of attention here. Again, we're talking about the integrity regime, the relationship to the estimates where that the officials before us, plus the minister, have come asking for $25 million to enhance the integrity regime.
2.6.
DPAs are part of that integrity regime. The minister and others, even members on the government side, have referred to the SNC Lavalin affairs. So I understand where you're coming from, but there is a connection that I can see. And so I think there is some relevance.
Okay.
Mr. McCauley.
So we see Mr.
Is there an answer, please?
As a point of clarification, the DPA is a criminal code of tool, if you will. It's not part of the integrity regime, but I'm happy to answer, although it will not be satisfactory to you, because I will say that, you know, in the decision of whether or not to proceed with the DPA is definitely within the purview of an independent public prosecutor. Whether or not that regime is discussed at Cabinet, I believe would be covered by Cabinet confidence.
Okay. During that same testimony, Chief of the, or Clerk of the Privy Council said there was concerns raised by Liberal Caucus about potential job losses at SNC. Were you one of those people in the caucus who raised those concerns?
I think that's...
Please, I said I have been listening intently, and I said that if I thought there was a line that we were either getting close to or crossing, that I would intervene. I think we've reached that line. Mr. McCauley?
I'll move on. Now, SNC lobbied your department many times, including September 27th, which was right in the middle of the consultation on the integrity regime. Was that lobbying regarding the integrity regime?
I go back to what Mr. Matthews said earlier about the ongoing work that SNC does with the department in terms of the administrative agreement that they have, and ongoing meetings we have with them regarding semi-annual reports, third-party monitors of their
This
functions.
was the meetings. This is lobbying. This is when the lobbying registered. They lobbied PSPC September 27th in the midst of the integrity regime consultations. What was the lobbying about? These were not consultations.
I can't
These
speak
were
to Mr.
lobbying.
McCauley. The engagements we...
Anyone? Okay. The new rules for the regime were supposed to be January 1 this year. Do we know when they're going to be actually put into effect?
As I said, we anticipate the new policy to come out within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Who will be the registrar within PSPC deciding who gets the administrative exemption?
That's the ADM responsible is a lady named Joanne Bray. It's been delegated to her by the minister.
Okay. Just wondering, has she met with anyone from SNC?
We can ask her because she's sitting behind us, so we'll get you an answer.
Great. And I would also like to know if anyone from the PMO has met with her as well, please, if you can ask her. Have we set up an ethics screen between the ADM you mentioned and perhaps lobbyists, SNC, et cetera?
So an ethics screen would come into effect if you have a pre-existing conflict. So she does not. So there's not an ethics screen from that perspective.
Mr. Chair, I know...
In that
point
case,
of
I
order.
assume then she's never met with them.
I know that you are reviewing the questions asked, but what has an ethics screen got to do with our supplementary estimates? Like,
Mr. Matthews, I believe, was in the process of answering the question. I'd like to hear the completion of his answer. Mr. Matthews.
It's a pretty short completion, so no pre-existing conflict. And anytime there's an administrative agreement in place, she would have regular dealings with one of those organizations, which include SNC. That would be part of her job right now because there's an administrative agreement in place.
Okay, two companies.
You've got about a minute left.
Right. two companies besides the 80 departments. There's two crown corporations have signed on to the integrity regime, but that does not include the infrastructure bank, which of course is involved with S&C with the only single project the infrastructure bank is doing. Do you believe the infrastructure bank should be brought on board the infrastructure regime?
That's a decision for the infrastructure bank. There's a broader question, I think, about how you take organizations that are arm's length or semi-detached from government, and do you apply this regime to them? We currently have arrangements, MOUs in place with two crown corporations, Defense Construction, and Detroit Windsor Bridge Authority, I believe, is the second one. So those are the two arm's length organizations we have a formal MOU with.
When did the Windsor Bridge Consortium or the authority sign on? Was it after S&C was turned down for the bid for that job?
We'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Any more time, sir? 10 seconds? Thank you for your indulgences today.
Madame Yip, over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you all for coming. So going back to Phoenix, Minister, are there further steps you plan on taking in the coming months to increase the speed in which transactions are processed?
Thanks for the question. So as I mentioned, we are at the point in May where every department and agency served by the Pay Center will be in a pod. We are constantly looking for innovative ways to address any kind of systemic barriers to dealing with this more quick. I think, Les, can you tell us a bit more about what's coming up?
We posted over the summer a request for information for under 6 streams to allow private sector vendors to bring forward innovative ideas, as the minister was referencing, on a number of fronts. Whether it's additional automation at the Pay Center, a better user experience for employees through the tools that have been developed, or human resource training and the approach to staff development around the system. So we are now in the process of soliciting feedback from those vendors under those 6 streams, and we are in a position to be able to move forward very quickly with contract award for a couple of bids in the next number of weeks on the automation front, which will allow more access to new ideas to help speed up some of the processes that may be manual now that have an opportunity to be automated.
Thank you. This pay uncertainty may affect departments' ability to do their work. I can certainly empathize with the uncertainty and the anxiety. Just wondering if you can comment on the retention of employees and recruitment of new employees?
It's a concern of mine. It's a concern that there is a legitimate perception out there that there's uncertainty of whether or not you come to work for the Government of Canada if you'll get paid properly. And we are taking a whole bunch of steps to address that perception. But in the meantime, there is that uncertainty. And we are trying to inform people as best possible of the immediate steps. And I'll refer again to emergency pay that can be taken if they are faced with a pay issue. But I will not in any way underscore the uncertainty and anxiety that people are facing because of this.
Can you tell me a bit more about the emergency pay?
Les, do you mind giving us the technical side?
Essentially, departments and agencies have the authority when regular payroll doesn't run to issue from their financial group what we call an emergency salary advance or a priority payment. So when Phoenix went live, of course, we did have hundreds, if not thousands, of occurrences each pay period where people were not getting the appropriate pay or no pay at all. And so we worked with departments and agencies to ensure that there was a more streamlined process and access for individuals to reach to their managers and to their deputies as required to receive these emergency salary advances and priority payments. Over time, as we've improved the functionality and the stability of the system, we're now in a position whereby if we, when we know that when we run the pay, that the confirm hasn't worked for an individual and they will get no pay or low pay, we can now prepare a report in advance and share that with the department and or agency for them to proactively reach out to the employee to ask if they would like an emergency salary advance or an additional priority payment to be able to tide them over until we can correct the pay in the next pay run. So the gaps of no pay, low pay are occurring very seldom, as opposed to when we first went live, because of the advances and the improvements through the collaboration with departments.
You have less than a minute.
I guess when you're looking towards the new system, from transitioning from the Phoenix system to the new system, will the new pay pods continue to provide assistance? How will you bridge that?
Yeah, so our role kind of in this whole thing is twofold. It's to stabilize the Phoenix and to make sure that the employees are paid accurately on time, but it's also to ensure that the data is clean, that we will then pass on to the next system. It is way too premature to speculate what the new system will look like. I think I can assure you that we will learn from every lesson and hard-fought victory on this file as we proceed to that new system, including keeping Phoenix live until we have absolute certainty.
Thank you very much. Our final intervention will come from Mr. Blakey for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, you've talked about the role of the Registrar of Ineligibility and Suspension and indicated that that registrar will be making independent decisions about whether or not to suspend companies from bidding on federal contracts. In fact, you liken that to the role of the Director of Public Prosecution, who also makes independent decisions. But we know that in that case, there is the ability of the Attorney General in that case to override decisions made by the Director of Public Prosecution. I'm wondering, in the final version of the integrity regime, will there be any kind of ministerial prerogative or government ability to override decisions that are taken by the registrar?
I can confidently say no.
Okay, so those are going to be completely independent decisions, but there isn't going to be anything in the integrity regime that gives any signal in terms of the severity of offenses. So we're going to have somebody making completely independent decisions with no ability for government to review those decisions, but also giving no direction in advance as to what the government would consider to be on the more strict or extreme range of offenses versus smaller offenses.
I will definitely take that feedback under advisement, but what I would say is the severity of the offense is a factor, is something that the registrar will take into consideration. But
there's no guideline for what counts as a severe offense. So, for instance, judges make decisions in criminal trials about the severity of an offense, but they do get direction through the criminal code. Petty theft and homicide are not treated the same in the code. It's the judge's independent decision about what's happened and the severity of that within a category of offenses. But there is direction given in the criminal code as to what's considered a very serious offense and what's considered a relatively minor offense. What you're contemplating is giving no such direction and absolute independence to the registrar. That's what I've heard today. Am I wrong about that? And if so, how?
I understand the analogy you're making, and I would say that's why we're putting in up to 10 years, and the types of things that the registrar will be obligated to take into consideration, including the severity of the offense, will also include prior offenses, will include mitigating circumstances, will include, give me some more examples, guys.
So those factors are documented indeed in the documents that are out there. So things like the role of the supplier or contractor in the offense itself, are they a primary player or a secondary?
Sure, but that's within a category of offense. There won't be any discrimination between classes of offense themselves, and whether some are considered more
severity
severe or
severity
less
is
severe.
in there, as well as the gains realized. So financial gains, their ability to voluntary disclosure, as well as prior behavior. So that's all a bucket of factors. But severity of offense is absolutely a factor.
So then what counts as a severe offense?
Sorry, Mr. Blakey, we're completely out of time. Minister, I do want to thank you sincerely for extending your time here with us today. I know you were only scheduled to be here till 3:30. You've extended that considerably. I know your staff is anxiously waiting to get you out the door to your next appointment, but I do thank you for being here.
Colleagues, thank you for your time as well.
You're very welcome. Colleagues, we will suspend for about 5 minutes while the minister clears the room, and we will continue on then with the officials left at the table. Around the table, we will be adjourning at 5:30 p.m. sharp, which gives us a bit of a truncated second tranche of questions and answers. But Mr. Matthews, I understand you've got a bit of an abbreviated statement, and if you can get into that, we'll try to get to our questions as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we did circulate a deck to all members in advance of the meeting, both myself and the Deputy Minister from Shared Services Canada, just to situate the hearing on estimates, because you've got three things in front of you. The plan for 17-18, which seems like a long time ago, our results, the supplementary estimates for the current year, as well as interim estimates for the upcoming fiscal year. So that's all kind of bundled into one hearing. If you have the deck in front of you, I may just very quickly take you to slide 3. And this would be a PSPC slide. I just want to sort of flag where we are. Authorities to date plus supplementary estimates B in relation to the previous year, we're up about 2%. So PSPC as a department is basically seeking or on track for 2% more authorities than it had in the previous fiscal year. Slide 4. Some of this has been touched on, but the highlights in terms of what we are seeking in supplementary estimates B. New authorities related to credit card acceptance or card acceptance and postage fees. Some space requirements for Government of Canada employees, that's 28 million. Some adjustments to existing authorities, and that relates to revenue from sales of real property, and we're happy to speak about what those properties are, as well as some authorities related to the pay system. And then there's some transfers back and forth between PSPC and other departments. The big one in there relates to a transfer from the National Research Council for contracting work around the Build Canada Innovation program. For slide 5, so 19-20, the upcoming fiscal year,
pages rather than the slide numbers, if you don't mind.
Should be slide.
Sorry, that's page 5.
That should be page 5. Yep.
It's page 5. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Please excuse. In terms of the interim estimate, so this is the money the department needs to kickstart the upcoming fiscal year. It's a formulaic approach. We basically take the authorities for the current fiscal year and ask for a fraction of those. For our operating dollars, we're asking for 4/12, if I have that right, Marty. And for our capital, we're asking for 3/12, just to get it started. And then maybe slide 7, page 7. I know sometimes the departmental results frameworks are a little bit confusing to follow, so we've got a crosswalk for you about our previous results framework and how it relates to the strategic outcome and program alignments. So current results on the left, old program names on the right, just to allow you to do that crosswalk. So I think, with apologies for the whirlwind tour through the deck, Paul, anything you want to add on Shared Services Canada?
Sure, thank you very much. I would just say very briefly that pages or slides 10 through 12 really just speak to the 26.9 increase that PSPC or Shared Services is looking for. It's about a 1.3% increase. As the minister said earlier, that's for cybersecurity, just a little over 23 million. Some 2.2 million for core technologies that we provide to the public service. So as more public servants come on, there's basic core technologies we provide for them, and some work we're doing on secure phones and technologies in that regard. So That is what is enunciated on pages or slides 10 through 12.
So, Mr. Chair,
We're fine now.
We are in your hands.
All right, excellent. Then we'll go directly into our questions. We'll start with Madame Mendez for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I would like to start with the work being done by TBS, and I imagine in collaboration with PSPC about the new pay system. What's being done? What has been part of the estimations you put in this budget? About you've invested a lot of money in Phoenix and stabilizing Phoenix, and I get it. I understand why, but what is being done now for the new pay system? What is the timeline that is expected to be around there, if I may? Perhaps Mr. Linklater, if possible. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, as you'll recall, Treasury Board Secretariat was allocated $16 million over 2 years in budget 2018 to explore options for the next generation pay system. That's work being led by the Chief Information Officer, Alex Binet, at the Treasury Board Secretariat. There are connections with the work that we're doing on stabilization, because we do need to have a stable system with data integrity prior to launching a new system, whether it's on a pilot basis or what have you. And so Treasury Board has engaged on an agile procurement process to determine whether or not there is software that would be able to function in support of the Government of Canada's pay environment. And they are going through a gating process to be able to winnow down the number of vendors who would potentially be able to provide that kind of support, whether as a unique or as multiple vendors. In terms of specific detail, I wouldn't want to go too far without referring to the experts, so I would commend Mr. Binet and the Treasury Board Secretariat for further detail on their process and their go-forward strategy.
But you are collaborating on
Absolutely.
on this measure. Okay, thank you very much. I would also now would like to go to the defense procurement aspect and how that has been changed and how it has evolved for the past year and a half, and what are the well, first of all, the steps that have been achieved, and what is the immediate future looking like in terms of defense procurement. I know that the minister spoke about the fighter jets, the interim fighter jets, and the procurement for the new ones. But there's also the shipbuilding that is, a big part of the procurement process of the government. So I would be very happy to hear, perhaps Mr. Fignon, if you would like to, or Mr. Matthews.
Could I maybe start, and then I'll kick it to my colleague Andre to correct me when I misspeak. In terms of defense procurement, the minister did highlight, as you've mentioned, Mr. Chair, the ships and news around jets. There's the next large procurement coming up is around future air crew training, and that's underway, and we could maybe get Mr. Filion to comment on that, but that's the next big one. In terms of process fixes in how we make defense procurement more efficient, the most recent innovation is around a risk-based authorities approach. So,
sorry?
Risk-based authorities.
Okay.
So, PSPC in conjunction with D&D procurement only, so only when the two of them are collaborating together. Treasury Board has put in place new authorities which basically give us more scope to do procurement without going into Treasury Board for approvals. So it's about 150 factors get applied in the procurement, and if it's low enough risk or medium complexity, we've kind of freed up some process there. So that will make procurement more efficient going forward. Treasury Board retains the right to pull in any procurement they want for a discussion and approval, but that's the most recent innovation on defense procurement. Andre, anything you want to add?
No, you mentioned the next large major procurement, the future aircrew training, is basically to replace the pilot training contracts that we have in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and in Southport, Manitoba, and also some of the training that occurs in Winnipeg by the Air Force by one large all-encompassing aircrew training system that would come in place in the 2020s. So we have, before the holidays, narrowed down to a list of suppliers that we're engaging constantly at the moment to develop their request for proposal, which we would like to issue early next year.
Si je peux me permettre, Monsieur Fillon, est-ce que ça a un lien?
Well, if I may, Mr. Fillon, is this linked to the shortage of pilots? Well, I know that's not the reason why you're changing the flight training center. I assume it's a matter of efficiencies. But we do know that at present there is a pilot shortage. Do you think that this is a way of bridging that gap for the Air Force? Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify that the location will not be changing. The contracts will simply be combined with one system that will provide training for all pilots. Clearly, when we identify the needs and the requirements for contractors, it'll be based on future requirements when it comes to flying training for the Air Force. In the meantime, contracts that are currently in place are delivering the goods for the Air Force.
Minute. Okay. Oh, yes. So another very fascinating aspect of what you do at PSPC, and that's maintaining federal properties. And I... Well, actually, it does interest me. As part of our history and as part of how we try to build a history in this country that is quite new, quite young. The minister mentioned that there has been some streamlining of properties, sales, and some revenue that was generated through the sale of some properties to maintain and better restore other properties. So I wonder which one of you would be willing to touch on that? I would be happy to hear about it. The sales and the...
Fortunately, none of you, since we're completely out of time, but it may be something that you want to respond to the question in writing to the clerk following this meeting. We'll now go to Mr. McCauley for 7 minutes, please.
Great, thank you. Mr. Matthews, we're talking about the interim estimates. In your interim estimates, when you say 3 months of 12, 3 of 12, is that 3 of 12 of next year's projected spending or based on this year's year-to-date spending?
It's based on the current year authorities. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Muldoon. Yes, we got that right. So it's basically we take our estimates in terms of what we have asked for to date from Parliament, so not spent, but to date.
Is that a general directions you received?
There's general guidelines out there to departments about how to plan. Where it gets different is some departments have very lumpy expenditures. They're not always evenly spread, so you have to factor that in.
You answered my question. Mr. Vandergrift, you haven't had a chance to speak much. I'm going to go over to you. The decision to change the production order at C-SPAN, who made that decision?
That was made by the Government of Canada working with the Yard to identify what would be the most efficient order in which to produce the vessels based on the latest available information of where C-SPAN is in their production. So the purpose of this really is twofold or threefold. By moving Joint Support Ship 1 first ahead of the offshore oceanographic science vessel, one allows the Yard to focus first all its engineering resources on one vessel at a time, as opposed to designing 2 vessels at the same time.
Yeah. Is it just the original production order incorrect, or is this because of the delays in their ships, the welding issues that have been going on?
I think it's the learnings. We've all learned a lot as we've worked through this program. I think it's the learnings of the program, also assessing where the Yard was at that point in time and how it could become the most efficient build order possible. And that's the conversation we set out to have with the Yard.
The supply ship, it's the Berlin class, I understand.
Yes.
Have we signed off on a design contract for that yet?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
In fact, construction already started.
I know the blocks started a while
year.
ago, again, because of other issues, but we've actually signed off on.
Absolutely, and as Mr. Vandergrift just mentioned, as the resequence will basically lead the shipyard in Canada to focus the attention on finishing the design work on the joint supply ship so that we can start full production
Are there any
next
costs
year.
involved with this, and who's going to eat those costs?
In fact, we have cost estimates for all of the vessels. One of the reasons, I think, as Mr. Vandergrift was mentioning, that there was a logic in changing the sequence was to actually allow for the oceanic science vessel to actually mature, so that we can mature the design, so that we can remove some of the risks. And in fact, we can see even the potential reduction in cost as a result of giving ourselves more time to mature that design. And not try to push the team to try to finish two designs concurrently and very fast. So the cost estimates are evolving, but we see a mitigation on cost as we are trying to mature the design so that we don't start production too prematurely.
Just to be blunt, Mr. Chair, the design around Berlin and JSS more mature than the other ship, so that was really the crux of the reordering.
And allows to move right from the early blocks into full rate production, as opposed to having another construction in the
How
middle.
much was driven by the need to get a second supply ship out, or is it just happenstance?
There's a need for ships, Mr. Chair, for both clients. So it was a matter of how do you get ships produced in the fastest way possible, and by focusing in on the JSS with the more mature design. Early blocks already started. It just was a more logical flow.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is there was obvious, a need to get the second supply ship. It's already late as soon as possible. Instead of changing up the order, was there any consideration given to the obelisks?
So in terms of the costs around a second interim ship, and it's better for defense to answer those, but there are costs around those.
Not cost, timing. The
Well,
timing to get the second ship out.
The two go together, though. If you're looking at trying to solve a timing problem, you have to look at costs, and the costs just weren't worth the investment.
The change in order of the ships, how is that going to affect the polar icebreaker?
The timelines on that ship is under review right now, and we're working with the yard on that. So, Mr. Chair, it's too early to give a precise time on the polar, but we understand the need for that project to proceed.
Yeah, I just wanted to stick with the Diefenbaker, the polar icebreaker. Library of Parliament, June 2015, put out a report. They said 1.3 billion to be completed by 2021 or 2022. Last we asked, and I asked them to update the report and their comment. This was after last time we had you in committee. Their report was no info is available, timeline to be decided. I have to ask, after so many years in the cost of this ship and the importance of this ship, how is it that we're sitting where we don't even know when we're going to start and finish this ship? Like, I have to,
So,
how is this possible?
We know the work program that Vancouver Shipyard has to deliver on, and it includes the polar icebreaker. They are moving forward right now, as you may know, with 2 deliveries of the fisheries science vessels this year, the third one next year. The attention now is fully on getting the JSS design completed so that full production can start next year, with the oceanic science vessel following, and then GSS number 2. So the work on the design,
the timeline, but how is it possible after so many years into the NSS, the importance, and we don't even have a timeline?
Well, we have a
Like, it's
timeline
not like
in the
it's
sense
late.
that it will
It's
be
like we
delivered.
don't even know when it's going to be started or completed.
We have a timeline in the sense that it will follow, the delivery of the polar will follow the delivery of the second GSS.
Okay,
and
when
the
this-
design
when will the
work for
second
that
GSS be
will
delivered then? 'Cause then I can figure out when the
and the
polar
design
iceberg-
work for that will start as we finish the OOSV
So we
design
have no
work.
idea. Do you find it acceptable this late that we have no idea?
We have an idea.
When then? What year?
Following the delivery of JSS,
You
which
don't
is
know.
in 2024.
I want to quote for you. This is from the commander of NORAD. Perfect. I actually have 37 seconds.
No, we got 12, 11,
Okay.
10.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Madame Hardcastle, welcome to our committee.
Thank you very much
you have
for
7
having
minutes.
me. Okay, I will use my 7 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm interested in asking a little bit about our Phoenix pay situation. I'm from the riding of Windsor-Tecumseh, and a lot of people are asking about the situation and the light at the end of the tunnel, and the responsiveness of the government, not just in terms of how it's actually literally responding, but questioning how nimble this this situation has proven that the government isn't in this situation. So I want to ask about two things in terms of the responsiveness. So maybe you can give us a clearer picture of that nimbleness. The first is, can one of you elaborate, or maybe a few of you elaborate a little bit on the pay pods method? Because my understanding is that it was supposed to help mitigate the stress and the crisis situation that people are in, that obviously that live paycheck to paycheck. So maybe just give us a little bit of an elaboration on how that is working, and any lessons that we've learned from that we can use to strengthen performance in the future.
Certainly. As the minister mentioned, we have seen progress with the pod model since it was launched with a pilot in December of 2017 with 3 departments. We've been working since then with the staff at the Pay Center in Miramichi and in our regional offices to expand the model as quickly as we can, with the appropriate level of staff and support to provide the leadership and the training and the coaching to allow the transition to a pod. Essentially, a pod, Mr. Chair, is a group of about 25 compensation staff, which include experienced compensation advisors, support staff who literally are taking both theoretical training but training on the job. They start off with straightforward transactions in the pod, and they grow their knowledge base over time, supplemented with training. The pod is also equipped with a team lead, a data analytics specialist to help direct workload to the right people to make sure that what comes in can be dealt with within the right time frame, the current pay period, so nothing new becomes old. What happens with the pod, with this organizational structure, is that linkages are made back to the departments that they are serving. So the direct connections with the HR, the finance groups, to allow information to flow back and forth. And it allows departments to identify which priority transactions they would like the pod to work on that respond to their own particular circumstances. Some departments choose to deal with the oldest cases. Some departments choose to deal with the most complex cases, regardless of age. But that's based on their own feedback and their interaction with their staff, and we work with them to grow those relationships. At this point, we are into the 3rd wave of pod rollout this week and next. We'll now be at about 70% of Pay Center staff being served by a pod, and that number will reach 100% by the end of May. And what we've seen in terms of results is that on average, even with the staggered rollout, the pods have reduced the backlog or the queue for their departments by almost 30%, whereas generally the reduction has been 25% across the entire network over the last 12 months. So we are seeing the benefits of this. Once all departments are on the pod, we will continue to see benefits, as the service ratio is quite a bit smaller than a transaction-based ratio. Fewer people can serve more people because of the structure and the knowledge sharing that happens, the skills development that happens. And at the same time, we see that departments are understanding more what they can do within their own HR or finance departments to streamline processes to improve the flow of information back and forth. And essentially the pod is dealing with an individual's file, so that as they clean things up, once a person is made whole and nothing new becomes old, they stay whole and their files remain clean.
Mr. Chair, how much time have I got?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so really quick then, I'm just asking, has anybody asked about the integrity regime? I just came in and... No. If that's already done with my time, there certainly isn't. But there's never enough to champion working class people that are working hard in our government as well. So, I guess what I'd like to ask is really quickly, there's still effort going into fixing Phoenix.
Yes.
We're looking for a new system. Is there some off chance that somebody's going to decide, no, we're going to fix Phoenix, we're going to stick with this? Or have we already decided we're fixing it interim and we're moving into something new?
The government in Budget 28 made a very clear signal that they were looking for a next generation HR to pay system. And so the Treasury Board Secretariat under the Chief Information Officer is now looking at options for what that new system should look like based on available software. And so there is a process now to evaluate potential vendors to be able to test options for moving forward. Just to underline though, any new system will be years before it would be fully functional. That means we need to continue to invest in stabilization efforts with Phoenix. Phoenix will remain the system of record until the data is clean enough to be able to transmit or transfer to a new platform. That's going to take a number of years to accomplish.
Thank you very much. Our final intervention will be with Mr. Drouin for 7 minutes.
Oh, I'm the final intervention. I feel so special. Thanks again for being here. And I do want to touch on procurement, but first I do have to ask a question on supplementary estimates B, and it's $19.9 million $19.9 million for shared services for cyber and information technology security initiatives. So what type of initiatives is SSC undertaking with that particular portfolio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the member's question. We are constantly working with partners to assess the threat landscape, see how it is evolving, and make sure that we have the tools necessary to respond to that. So it is a process of continually assessing, working with our partners in the security agencies, and then making sure we have the technology, the firewall, the perimeter properly protected, so that government services and employees are able to function within our network safely and security. So it is just this constant, the threats are changing, understanding where they're changing, what security we need to put in place, software, servers, to protect that perimeter.
And does SSC does a sort of an assessment? I would think, and I mean I'm just going off the ball here, but I would think departments like National Defense would obviously have better equipment or better protection than perhaps other departments. So does SSC sort of use best practices that other departments have done and then try to implement those in other departments? And I'm assuming that threat levels are different from department to department.
So again, thanks for the member's question. We have worked with to set up a center for cybersecurity. So there is actually a center of expertise that is responsible for identifying what those best practices are, identifying what the security profile needs to be for the Government of Canada, and we work very closely with them to make sure that we understand the threat profile and what the appropriate response mechanism is. And they're actually doing that right now with all departments. So we're trying to consolidate and collapse that to actually reduce risk and to bring everybody to the best practice right across the federal public service.
And that would bring me to my next question with procurement. So we know threat levels, and there's often new ways that government systems can get hacked, and they often move a lot faster than technology can get adapted to. But how are we doing with procurement? Like, are you guys talking with procurement to say, okay, well, we've got these threat levels that are constantly changing, and we've got technology that's constantly changing, but if procurement doesn't adapt quickly enough to ensure that, yes, SSC and the Government of Canada can procure new technologies and new systems quick enough so we don't fall behind the line, essentially, in putting our systems at risk. Is that conversation happening as well?
So that conversation is absolutely happening at multi-levels. So as we've heard earlier, we are looking at new procurement processes that are agile, that are meant to move small but fast to see what the level of risk is, understand what's working, and be able to scale those up quickly. We also have processes through that ensure supply chain integrity of anything that we are procuring, so that we're able to see not just the end vendor, but the whole supply chain that resulted in a product or service being provided to us, so that we have confidence in it all the way through and are able to see all of the potential areas where there may be a threat risk and are confident that those have been properly mitigated. So that supply chain integrity through the procurement is exceptionally important to us as we move forward.
That's great. Mr. Chair, I'm done.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Dwan. Madame Paquette, gentlemen, thank you all for your appearance here today. Your information that you transmitted has been helpful. For the benefit of those of you who have not had the ability to answer certain questions because of time constraints, I would suggest that if you can provide those questions to the clerk in writing, and we will make sure that we distribute them to the appropriate colleagues around this table who had asked the questions originally. And if all members will receive the answers to those questions. Once again, thank you so much for your appearance here today, and colleagues, we are adjourned.